He was glad to find a cheap room, but his roommate was an alien vampire woman. Carter Hayes had exactly 2 hours before he'd officially become homeless, and the irony wasn't lost on him that he'd traveled 300 million kilometers from Earth only to end up sleeping on a bench. The message from the housing office had been brutally efficient. Lease terminated, roommate withdrawal, vacate by 1800 hours. He'd read it 4 times, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. They hadn't. Nexus Station buzzed around him with the peculiar energy of a place where 5 species tried to coexist in a rotating cylinder of metal and optimism. Through the viewport beside the student housing board, Carter could see the inner gardens, a strip of genetically modified greenery that wrapped around the station's central axis, defying gravity with the same stubborn determination he was currently lacking. Beyond that, stars wheeled past in their eternal dance, indifferent to his financial crisis. His thumb pad showed his account balance. 1,847 credits. Exactly 1,847 credits to last the entire semester. The cheapest single room he'd found was 950 credits monthly. He'd done the math 3 times, each calculation more depressing than the last. By midterms, he'd be eating recycled protein paste and showering in the gym. "You look like someone just told you the oxygen recyclers are failing," a voice said beside him. Carter glanced over. A Vendorian student, identifiable by the blue-tinted skin and the bioluminescent patterns that rippled across her forearms, stood reviewing the same housing board, her expression sympathetic. "Worse," Carter said. "My roommate situation imploded." "Ah," she nodded knowingly. "Welcome to the Why Is Everything on This Station So Expensive club. We meet never because none of us can afford the meeting room fees." Despite everything, Carter smiled. Then his thumb pad chimed. A new posting had appeared on the board, and the price made him blink. "Room available. Shared apartment. 400 credits per month. Furnished. Quiet preferred. Contact Valora, Unit 7 Delta. 400 credits." That was less than half the market rate. Less than a third of some places. Carter's finger hovered over the contact button. This had to be a mistake, or a scam, or both. Places this cheap didn't exist on Nexus Station, unless they were the size of a storage closet or located next to the waste reclamation sector or... His finger pressed the button before his brain could finish listing reasons. This was too good to be true. The response came in 11 seconds. "Come view today. 1,800 hours." Carter checked the time. 16:47 hours. 13 minutes to get across the station to Sector 7. He could make it if he caught the express tram and didn't stop to question his life choices. "Good luck," the Vendorian said, watching him grab his bag. "If it's real, buy a lottery ticket after. You'll be on a winning streak." The tram ride gave Carter exactly enough time to imagine every possible disaster. Maybe the apartment was a converted maintenance closet. Maybe furnished meant a sleeping bag and a crate. Maybe Valora was a serial killer. Did they have serial killers on space stations? Probably. Statistically, there had to be at least one. Unit 7 Delta was in the older residential ring. Not the gleaming modern blocks near campus, but not quite the sketchy sections either. The kind of place that had seen better decades but maintained its dignity through regular upkeep and good lighting. Carter found the door, checked his reflection in his thumb pad screen, still looked desperate, couldn't fix that, and pressed the chime. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss that sounded expensive. The woman standing there made Carter forget every question he'd prepared. She was striking in a way that bypassed conventional human beauty and landed somewhere in the territory of unsettling artwork. Pale silver skin that seemed to catch and hold the corridor's light. Dark hair pulled back severely enough to be either a fashion statement or a warning. And eyes. Crimson eyes that locked onto him with an intensity that made his hindbrain wake up and start screaming helpful suggestions about running. But it was her ears that confirmed what his instincts already knew. Long and elegantly pointed, they swept back from her temples in a way that no humans ever could. Sanguis, vampire. Carter's survival instincts, his parents' warnings, and every horror story he'd ever heard all activated simultaneously. His mouth went dry. His hand twitched toward his bag strap. 400 credits a month, his desperate brain whispered. 400 credits. You're Carter? Her voice was cultured, measured, with an accent he couldn't place. Probably because she'd learned human languages from textbooks rather than birthright. Yes. His voice cracked slightly. Professional, Hayes, very professional. You're Valora. I am. She stepped aside, the movement fluid and precise. Come in, I'll show you the space. Carter's feet moved before his brain approved the decision. The apartment interior was a slap of unexpected luxury. Clean lines, actual furniture that matched, and windows, real windows, not view screens, overlooking the inner gardens. The space was easily twice the size of what he'd had before, with two distinct bedroom doors and a kitchen that looked like it had appliances from this decade. The second bedroom is yours if you want it, Valora said, gesturing toward the right door. Her movements were economical, nothing wasted. Private bath, good desk space, high-speed network access included. Carter peered into the room. It was perfect. Genuinely, impossibly perfect. His engineering projects would fit. His absurd collection of technical manuals would fit. His dignity would fit, with room left over. I'm aware the price is low, Valora continued, and Carter turned to find her watching him with those unsettling crimson eyes. I'm willing to answer the question you're clearly thinking. Carter swallowed. His mouth felt full of recycled station air. Why is it so cheap? Because most people see what I am and leave. Carter moved into Unit 7 Delta at 2100 hours with everything he owned compressed into 2 duffel bags and a transit crate that had seen better star systems. The apartment's door recognized his biosignature on the first try. Valora had already programmed him into the system, and he dragged his belongings into his new room with the kind of exhausted relief usually reserved for survivors of natural disasters. His room was bigger than he'd remembered from the viewing. Probably because during the viewing, his brain had been occupied with not panicking about the vampire roommate situation. Now, alone in the space, he could appreciate the details. The desk built into the wall with actual cable management ports, the closet that didn't smell like the previous tenant's questionable life choices, the window with a view of the gardens that didn't flicker like a cheap view screen. He unpacked with the efficiency of someone who'd been living out of bags for 3 days. Clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, engineering textbooks stacked on the desk in a system that looked chaotic but made perfect sense to him. His collection of half-built project models went on the shelf, a miniature gravity regulator that didn't regulate gravity, a communications array that only picked up station maintenance chatter, and his pride and joy. A nearly functional plasma coupling that had earned him top marks last semester and a stern warning about lab safety. From Valora's side of the apartment, silence. Complete, absolute silence. Carter pressed his ear to his door and heard nothing. No footsteps, no music, no sounds of habitation. Either his roommate moved like smoke, or she'd already left for her night shift. He opened his door cautiously and peered out. The living area was empty. Valora's bedroom door was closed, its surface as pristine and unrevealing as a blank screen. The kitchen was exactly as they'd left it during the apartment tour. Clean, organized, slightly intimidating in its perfection. Carter had lived with other engineering students before. He knew what shared spaces normally looked like. Dishes reproducing in the sink, mysterious stains on the counter. That one spoon that everyone used and no one washed. This kitchen looked like a photograph from a Habitat design magazine. He made himself a sandwich, carefully wiping down the counter after each step, and retreated to his room. Through his window, the station's rotation brought the darkness of space into view, stars fixed in their positions while Nexus Station spun its endless waltz around them. Somewhere out there was Earth, currently on the other side of the sun, probably not missing him very much. His thumbpad chimed, a message from his mother. Did you find housing? Your father is worried. Call us. Carter typed back. Found a place. All good. Classes start tomorrow. We'll call this weekend. He didn't mention the vampire roommate. That conversation required more energy than he currently possessed, and possibly professional mediation. The first week established a pattern that Carter began to think of as living with a very considerate ghost. He'd wake at 6:30, stumble to the bathroom, and find it spotless. No evidence Valora had used it, though logically she must have. He'd eat breakfast in the kitchen and discover a note in precise handwriting. Package for you, left by door. V. He'd return from classes at 1800 hours to find the living area exactly as he'd left it, except cleaner somehow. His textbooks would be where he'd abandoned them, but the couch cushions would be straightened. His empty coffee mug from the morning would be washed and placed in the drying rack. It was like living with an extremely efficient cleaning robot, except robots didn't leave notes with little dashes for signatures. Carter caught exactly 2 glimpses of Valora that first week. Once, as she was leaving for her shift, a flash of dark clothing and silver skin moving past his doorway at 19:45 hours. And once at 0400, when he'd gotten up for water and found her in the kitchen, standing completely still by the window, silhouetted against the garden lights. She'd turned, nodded once, and disappeared into her room before he could manage a greeting. It was the kind of living arrangement that seemed perfect on paper. Compatible schedules, mutual respect for space, no awkward roommate bonding activities. And yet Carter found himself oddly curious about the woman he was sharing an apartment with. The woman who cleaned up after him without complaint, who left helpful notes, who paid her share of the utilities exactly on time via automated transfer. The woman who everyone else had rejected because of what she was. On day 8, Carter broke the pattern. He'd been studying in his room, working through a particularly nasty quantum mechanics problem set, when his music app decided to malfunction. Instead of playing through his headphones, it started blasting through his room speakers at a volume that probably violated at least 3 station noise ordinances. He lunged for his thumb pad, fumbling with the controls, finally managing to kill the sound after what felt like an hour, but was probably 15 seconds. In the sudden silence, his heart hammering, he heard something from the living area. Laughter. Not cruel laughter or annoyed laughter, but genuine amusement, light and surprisingly warm. Carter opened his door to find Valora standing in the living area, still in what he assumed was her work uniform, dark-fitted clothing with a medical facility insignia on the shoulder. Her crimson eyes were actually sparkling. "I'm sorry," Carter said immediately. "The app glitched. I didn't mean—" "I know what Terra Nova Station folk music sounds like," Valora interrupted, and he realized she was still smiling. Actual smile, not the polite professional expression from the apartment viewing. "That was definitely a malfunction, unless you have truly terrible taste." "It was supposed to be classical earth music," Carter defended, "for concentration. At that volume, you concentrate on nothing but hearing damage." She moved toward her room, then paused. "Your typing is louder than you think, by the way. The walls aren't as thick as the landlord claims." Carter felt heat rise to his face. "I use headphones for everything else." "I know, I'm adapting." She tilted her head slightly, those long ears catching the light. "I've had louder roommates. At least you're not hosting parties or practicing the Vendorian drum ceremonies." "That's, oddly specific." "Roommate number 3, Valora said. "He lasted 2 weeks before I broke the lease myself." 3 weeks into their arrangement, Carter's entire academic career nearly ended at 0247 hours on a Tuesday morning. He was sprawled across the living room floor, surrounded by the scattered remains of his Advanced Propulsion Systems project, a miniature ion drive engine that was supposed to demonstrate basic thrust vectoring principles and was currently demonstrating nothing except Carter's impending failure. The power regulator had burned out, actually burned out, with a small pop and a wisp of smoke that still hung in the air like the ghost of his grade point average. Carter had 12 hours until the project was due, and the parts shop wouldn't open until 0800. Even if he sprinted there the moment it opened, he'd never make it to his 1,000-hour presentation. "Come on, you worthless piece of—" He caught himself before finishing the curse, remembering that Valora was theoretically sleeping on the other side of the apartment. Vampires did sleep, right? Or did they just sort of exist quietly in darkness? He realized he'd been living with her for 3 weeks and still knew almost nothing about basic sanguis biology. He prodded the dead regulator with his multimeter, hoping for a miracle. The multimeter confirmed what his eyes and nose had already told him. The component was completely fried. Carter let his head fall back against the couch with a thunk that probably violated the quiet hours he'd promised to respect. This was it. his first major project at Nexus Station University, and he was going to fail because of a stupid power regulator that cost 15 credits and might as well have been on Earth for all the good it did him at 24/7 hours. Problem? Carter's head snapped up so fast his neck cracked. Valora stood in her doorway, wearing dark sleeping clothes that somehow still looked formal. Her silver skin caught the apartment's night lighting, and her long ears were slightly tilted forward. An expression he'd learned meant curiosity rather than annoyance. Sorry, Carter said immediately, sitting up. I know it's your quiet time. I'll take this back to my room. What's wrong with it? Valora moved closer, her steps silent on the floor. Carter had never heard her footsteps, not once in 3 weeks. It was deeply unsettling and occasionally convenient when he needed to do something embarrassing without an audience. The power regulator burned out. Carter gestured helplessly at the scattered components. I need a replacement, but nothing's open until morning, and this is due at 10, and I've been working on it for 6 weeks. What specification? Carter blinked. What? The regulator. What specification? Valora crouched beside his project with the kind of fluid grace that reminded Carter she wasn't human, no matter how human she looked. She picked up the dead component, examined it with those unnerving crimson eyes, and set it down. Standard micrograde, variable output, thermal protection, rated to 400 degrees. Yes? How did you... Valora was already moving toward her room. She returned 30 seconds later with a small component case that looked far too organized to belong to anyone Carter had ever studied with. She opened it, selected a regulator that looked identical to his dead one, and held it out. Try this. Carter stared at the component like she just handed him a bar of solid platinum. This is expensive. Are you sure? I have spares. Valora settled onto the floor across from him, apparently unconcerned about sitting on the carpet in her sleeping clothes at 02:47 hours. I do medical equipment repair as part of my work study. We use similar regulators in portable diagnostic scanners. This should be compatible. Carter took the component with shaking hands. It was compatible, exactly compatible, down to the pin configuration. He installed it with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for diffusing explosives, connected the power supply, and held his breath. The ion drive hummed to life. The thrust indicators lit up green. The vectoring controls responded smoothly. It worked. It actually worked. Oh, thank God, Carter breathed. Thank you. Seriously, thank you. This just saved my entire grade, possibly my entire academic career, definitely my scholarship. You're welcome. There was something almost amused in Valora's voice. And you're good with your hands, steady. That's not common in engineering students. Most of them are brilliant with theory and terrible with practical assembly. Carter looked up from his project to find her watching him with an expression that might have been approval. It was hard to tell with her. She kept her emotions behind the same pristine control she applied to everything else. I grew up fixing things on my parents' orbital farm, Carter said. You learn to be steady when you're repairing equipment in 0G. Drop a tool and it's gone forever into the black. Practical experience, Valora nodded. That explains why you actually clean your workspaces. Most students I knew treated shared areas like debris fields. Speaking of which, I'm sorry about this mess. Carter gestured at the components spread across half the living room. I'll clean it all up right now. Finish your project first. Valora stood with that same unsettling silence. I need to prepare for my shift anyway. But Carter? Yeah? Next time you have a crisis at 02:47 hours, just knock on my door. I'm usually awake anyway. She paused. And you can pay me back for the regulator by not failing out. I'd prefer not to search for another roommate. The last interview process was exhausting. Carter watched her disappear into her room, still processing what had just happened. His vampire roommate, the person everyone else had rejected, who he'd been half afraid of for 3 weeks, had just saved his academic career with spare parts and practical advice. He looked down at his functioning project, at the regulator that had cost Valora nothing but meant everything to him, and felt something shift in his understanding of his living arrangement. 2 months into living at Unit 7 Delta, Carter had developed what he privately thought of as the roommate detection system. He could tell when Valora was home by subtle signs. The particular way the environmental controls adjusted themselves slightly cooler, the faint scent of the medicinal soap she used, the sense of another presence that wasn't quite sound or movement, but something in between. Tonight, the apartment had that occupied feeling, which meant Valora was home earlier than usual. Carter emerged from his room at 1847 hours, heading for the kitchen to grab something before his evening study session, and found her already there, standing by the heating unit with a cup of tea steaming in her hands. They both froze for a moment, caught in the rare overlap of their schedules like binary stars that had accidentally aligned. "How's the engineering track?" Valora asked, breaking the silence. She was still in her work uniform, looking tired in a way Carter had never seen before. Not physically tired. He wasn't sure vampires got physically tired, but something deeper. Emotionally exhausted, maybe. "Brutal but manageable," Carter said, reaching for the refrigerator. "How's medical tech?" "Same." Valora poured her tea with precise movements, nothing wasted. "Though I think my supervising instructor still doesn't trust me around the blood samples. Yesterday she asked me to inventory the equipment storage instead. 3 hours of counting bandages." Carter grabbed a protein bar and turned to look at her properly. "That's ridiculous. You're top of the class, aren't you? I saw the honor roll posting." "Second," Valora corrected. "And yes, it's ridiculous. But stereotypes die hard, especially when they involve vampires and blood." She took a sip of her tea, and Carter caught the bitter edge in her voice. "The other students won't partner with me for lab work. They all suddenly have preferred partners when the instructor assigns groups. I end up working alone while everyone else collaborates." Carter leaned against the counter, his protein bar forgotten. He'd seen the way other students looked at Valora in the corridors, the ones who recognized what she was, the way they'd step aside, press themselves against the walls, watch her pass with a mixture of fear and fascination. He'd thought he was imagining it, or that maybe it was normal station behavior he didn't understand yet. Apparently not. "That's why the apartment was so cheap," Carter said quietly. 6 potential roommates before me. You said one of them literally ran. The Centaurian student." Valora's smile was sharp and humorless. "He saw my eyes, made a religious gesture I didn't recognize, and backed out so fast he tripped over the doorframe. The human before him lasted through the entire apartment tour, asked about utilities and network access, then sent a message 2 hours later saying he'd found alternative arrangements." "People are idiots." "People are cautious," Valora corrected. "It's not entirely unjustified. Sanguis have a complicated history with other species. We've earned some of our reputation." Carter bit into his protein bar, artificial chocolate flavor that tasted like someone's vague memory of what chocolate should be, and chewed while he considered his next words. "You've been nothing but helpful since I moved in. You gave me a spare component that saved my grade. You're quiet, you're clean, you leave actually useful notes instead of passive-aggressive ones. You're honestly a better roommate than most humans I know." Valora's crimson eyes studied him over the rim of her teacup, and Carter couldn't quite read her expression. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion that he was mocking her. "I mean it," Carter continued. "My last roommate, human by the way, used to eat my food, never cleaned anything, and once tried to borrow my engineering tools to fix his girlfriend's jewelry. You know what happened? He melted a hole through her necklace and blamed me for having complicated equipment." That got a reaction. Valora's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Before that," Carter went on, warming to his theme, "I had a roommate who was convinced the station's water recycling system was poisoning us. He bought 50 liters of raw asteroid water from some dealer in the market section. Turned out to be regular tap water with food coloring. Cost him 2 weeks' meal budget." "That's impressively stupid," Valora said, and this time she was definitely smiling. "Humans are creative with our stupidity," Carter agreed. "We don't need supernatural powers to be dangerous. We just need conspiracy theories and poor impulse control." Valora set down her teacup with a soft clink. "Your typing still sounds like a machine gun. I've adapted to most of your quirks, but that one continues to penetrate even my meditation techniques." "I use headphones for everything else," Carter protested, recognizing the shift to lighter territory and grateful for it. "Your keyboard doesn't have a headphone jack, Carter. I could type softer." You type like you're angry at the letters personally. Valora picked up her tea again, and her expression had softened into something almost playful. I've started timing my sleep cycles around your study schedule. I fall asleep to the sound of aggressive typing and wake up to the sound of you swearing at your projects. I don't swear that much. Last week you called a circuit board 7 different things that would get you expelled if you said them to a professor. Carter felt his face heat. The tolerances were impossible. The specifications made no sense. It was designed by someone who hated engineering students. It was designed by Professor Halverson, Valora said. And yes, he hates engineering students. He told me so directly when I asked about cross-department lab access. She checked the time display on the wall. I should go. Shift starts in 30 minutes. She moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the frame. A gesture Carter had learned meant she was about to say something she'd been thinking about for a while. Thank you, Valora said quietly, for staying, for not running like the others, for treating me like a person instead of a... She stopped, searching for the word. Monster? Carter offered. I was going to say liability, but yes, that too. Carter's parents arrived at Nexus Station on a Thursday afternoon with the kind of dramatic timing that suggested the universe had a sense of humor, and it wasn't kind. He'd known they were coming. His mother had sent 17 messages confirming their transport schedule. But somehow he'd managed to avoid thinking about the inevitable moment when they'd discover his living situation. That moment came at 15:34 hours when his mother knocked on the apartment door with the particular rhythm that Carter recognized from childhood. 3 sharp raps that communicated both affection and the expectation of immediate compliance. He opened the door to find both parents standing in the corridor, looking exactly as out of place as he'd feared. His father wore his station formal clothes, the outfit he'd probably researched extensively and still got slightly wrong. His mother had her inspection face on, the one she used when visiting his dorm rooms back on Earth. Carter! His mother pulled him into a hug that smelled like the recycled air of a transport shuttle and the particular brand of anxiety that only parents could generate. You look thin. Are you eating properly? The gravity here is different, isn't it? Are you adjusting? Mom, I'm fine. The gravity is 0.9 standard. It's basically the same. And this is the apartment? His father peered past him into the living area with the expression of someone trying to find structural flaws. The lease is legitimate? You verified the contract? Yes, Dad. Everything's legal and registered. Carter stepped aside to let them in, mentally calculating the odds that Valora was still asleep and would remain in her room for the duration of this visit. High odds. She usually slept until at least 1,800 hours. He had time. His mother immediately began inspecting the kitchen with the thoroughness of a station safety auditor. This is much nicer than I expected for student housing. The appliances look new. Is that a variable protein synthesizer? Carter, those are expensive. How much is your rent? 400 credits monthly, Carter said and watched both parents freeze. 400? His father turned slowly. Son, the average student housing in this sector is over 900. What's wrong with this place? Nothing's wrong with... Is it near the reactor core? Are the radiation shields failing? Is there a structural issue? His mother was now examining the walls like they might suddenly develop cracks. Carter James Hayes, what aren't you telling us? The sound of a door opening behind him was so quiet that only Carter heard it. He turned, his stomach sinking, and found Valora standing in her doorway, clearly just awakened. Her dark hair was slightly mussed, the first time he'd ever seen it not perfectly arranged, and she wore sleeping clothes that were somehow still more formal than what most people wore to class. His parents turned at his movement and went completely still. The silence stretched for approximately 5 seconds, which felt like several geological epochs. You're living with one of them. His mother's voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. She'd gone pale, which Carter hadn't known was possible for someone who'd spent the last 3 months on a transport with artificial lighting. Mom! Carter, no! His father stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Carter and Valora in a gesture that was probably instinctive and definitely insulting. This isn't safe. You need to pack your things right now. We'll find you somewhere else. Hello. Valora's voice cut through his father's panic with professional precision. I'm Valora, Carter's roommate. You must be his parents. She moved forward with that characteristic silence, extending a hand. It's nice to meet you. Neither of his parents took her hand. His mother made a sound that might have been a whimper. His father's jaw clenched so tight Carter could hear his teeth grinding from 3 meters away. Valora lowered her hand without any visible reaction, her face settling into the same polite professional mask Carter remembered from his first apartment viewing. I have a shift starting soon. I'll leave you to your visit. She nodded once and disappeared back into her room, the door sliding shut with a whisper of hydraulics. The moment she was gone, both parents turned on Carter with matching expressions of horror. Living with one of those things, his mother's whisper was somehow more cutting than if she'd shouted. Carter, it's dangerous. It's inappropriate. You need to find somewhere else immediately. We'll help you. We'll pay the difference in rent, whatever it costs. Her name is Valora, Carter interrupted, and was surprised by how sharp his own voice sounded. She's not a thing. She's a medical tech student. She works night shifts, respects boundaries, and she's helped me more than any human roommate ever did. Carter, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, Mom. She's my friend. The word surprised him as he said it, but it was true. Somewhere between the borrowed component and the machine gun typing comments, Valora had become his friend. And I'm not moving out. His father pulled him aside, lowering his voice like Valora might have supernatural hearing, which Carter reflected she probably did. Son, I understand that housing is expensive, but you can't trust them. Their species, their history. Her history is studying medical technology and getting rejected by roommates because of what she is, not who she is, Carter said firmly. She's never been anything but professional and kind. She gave me a spare component at 3 a.m. when my project was failing. She leaves notes about package deliveries. She makes jokes about my typing. She's a good person, Dad. It's not a person. Stop. Carter's voice came out harder than he'd intended, hard enough that both parents actually stepped back. I'm not having this argument. Valora is my roommate and my friend. If you can't respect that, you can leave. His mother looked like he'd slapped her. The conversation with his parents lasted another 47 minutes, most of which Carter spent standing his ground while they cycled through various stages of concern, anger, and reluctant acceptance. His father tried the practical approach, citing statistics about interspecies conflicts that were 20 years out of date. His mother attempted emotional manipulation, talking about family reputation and what the neighbors back on the orbital farm would think. Carter remained unmoved, and eventually his parents left with tight-lipped promises to discuss this later, that he knew meant they'd spend the entire trip back to Earth worrying. The moment the door closed behind them, Carter leaned against it and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in his lungs for an hour. Through Valora's closed door, he could hear nothing. No movement, no sound, just that absolute silence that meant she was either deeply asleep or sitting completely still listening to everything. He knocked softly. Valora, they're gone. Silence stretched for 15 seconds. Then, I heard. Carter winced. Right, vampire hearing. She'd probably heard every word of that disaster. I'm sorry about... The door slid open. Valora stood there fully dressed now, her hair back to its usual severe arrangement, her expression carefully neutral. You don't need to apologize for your parents' fear. It's reasonable, given what they've been taught about my species. It's not reasonable. It's prejudice. Both can be true. Valora moved past him into the living area, and Carter followed. She stood by the windows, looking out at the gardens rotating past, her long ears silhouetted against the artificial sunlight. I can help you find another place if your family's uncomfortable. I know landlords who might have openings. It wouldn't take long. No. Valora turned, those crimson eyes studying him with an intensity that still made his survival instincts whisper warnings his conscious mind had learned to ignore. I'm not leaving, Carter said firmly. My family will adapt. They don't have to like it, but they'll respect my choice eventually. And even if they don't... He moved to stand beside her at the window. You're stuck with me at least until graduation, possibly longer if I decide to pursue advanced studies here. That's another 3 years. Terrifying, isn't it? 3 more years of machine gun typing and creative profanity at circuit boards. The corner of Valora's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough that Carter counted it as a victory. Your mother looked like she was going to faint, Valora said quietly. Your father positioned himself between us like I was going to attack you right there in the living room. My parents once locked themselves in their shuttle for 6 hours because they thought they saw a maintenance drone malfunctioning, Carter said. They're not great with things outside their comfort zone. Give them time. Eventually they'll realize you're more civilized than half the humans at the student union who eat with their mouths open. This time Valora did smile, small and genuine. Is that the bar for civilization? Proper eating etiquette? You'd be surprised how many engineering students fail that test. Carter watched the gardens rotate past, the engineered greenery that kept the station's air breathable and its inhabitants sane. Thank you, by the way. For what? For being professional with my parents, even when they were being... He searched for a diplomatic word. Terrified and rude, Valora supplied. I was going to say challenging, but yes. Carter turned to face her properly. You could have been angry. You had every right to be angry. Instead, you introduced yourself politely and gave us space. That's more grace than most people would have managed. I've had practice. Valora's voice carried decades of experience Carter couldn't quite imagine. You're not the first friend whose family has reacted poorly to my existence, though you are the first who stood up for me quite so firmly. Friend, Carter repeated, feeling something warm settle in his chest at the confirmation that the word worked both ways. So we're officially friends now? Not just economically compatible roommates? I suppose we've crossed that threshold. Valora moved toward her room, then paused in the doorway. Though I reserve the right to revoke friendship privileges if your typing gets any louder. I have limits. I'll type softer. You won't, but I appreciate the lie. She glanced back at him, and her expression was softer than he'd ever seen it. Thank you, Carter, for staying, for defending me to your parents, for... She stopped, seeming to search for words. For being someone who sees past the ears and the eyes to the person underneath. Thank you for giving a broke engineering student a chance when you could have kept searching for someone whose family wouldn't give you grief. I suppose there are worse fates than being stuck with you until graduation, Valora said, echoing his earlier words with perfect precision and just enough warmth to make it clear she was joking. At least you clean up after yourself. That's rare in your species. After she closed her door, Carter returned to his room and found a message waiting on his thumbpad. His mother. We're worried. Please reconsider. We love you. He typed back. I love you too. But I'm staying. Valora is a good person. Give her a chance. His father's response came 3 minutes later. We'll talk about this when we visit again. Your mother is very upset. Carter set down his thumbpad and looked around his room, at his organized chaos of engineering projects, at the window with its view of the rotating gardens, at the door that led to a living space he shared with someone everyone else had rejected. 3 months ago, he'd been desperate and nearly homeless, willing to take any arrangement that kept him at Nexus Station University. He'd walked into this apartment terrified of his new roommate, guided only by financial necessity and the thin hope that maybe it wouldn't be as bad as his instincts screamed. Now, sitting in his room in Unit 7 Delta, Carter realized he wasn't just tolerating his living situation. He was grateful for it. The cheap rent had brought him here, but somewhere along the way, between borrowed components and machine gun typing jokes, between late-night crises and casual kitchen conversations, he'd found something more valuable than affordable housing. He'd found a home, and a friend who happened to have long ears and crimson eyes and a dry sense of humor that made him laugh even when his parents were trying to convince him he was in danger. His thumbpad chimed, a new message, this time from Valora. Your typing has resumed. I assume the family crisis is resolved enough for you to focus on academics again? Carter smiled and typed back. Engineering waits for no one, not even vampire roommates with supernatural hearing. Unfortunate for both of us. Try to keep the profanity to a minimum. Some of us are trying to sleep. No promises, Carter wrote, and turned back to his quantum mechanics problem, set with the comfortable knowledge that on the other side of the wall, his roommate was probably smiling too. Sometimes the best opportunities came from taking chances on the unexpected, and sometimes a 400 credit apartment turned into exactly where you were meant to be. The end.